International trade often appears in the news as a source of political friction and economic tension, yet it remains the foundation of the modern global economy. This creates a puzzling contradiction. Why do nations lean so heavily into a system that seems to create so much domestic conflict? To understand the incentive, consider a simplified scenario. Imagine one worker in the United States and one worker in Japan. In a single month, both are capable of building exactly one car. However, the American worker can grow 2 tons of food in that time, while the Japanese worker can only produce 1 ton. Since the American worker produces more total food, the U.S. holds the absolute advantage in agriculture. But looking at who is better at farming doesn't actually tell us which country should focus on cars and which should focus on food. These raw production numbers are impressive, but they ignore the hidden price of labor. To see why these nations trade, we have to look at what they give up every time they choose to build a car. Economists measure the cost of a car by the amount of food that wasn't grown while that worker was in the factory. This is the opportunity cost, the sacrifice required to produce a specific good. In the US, one car costs 2 tons of food. In Japan, that same car requires a sacrifice of only 1 ton. Because they give up less food, the car is cheaper for Japan to make. This lower sacrifice gives Japan the comparative advantage. By specializing in their areas of comparative advantage and trading the surplus, both nations can end up with more food and more cars than they could ever produce alone. It is a mathematical path to mutual prosperity. This specialization leads to massive efficiency. By focusing on its agricultural edge, American farmers utilize vast scales and advanced technology to drive national prosperity. However, importing Japanese cars means domestic auto workers must compete with an industry that has a lower opportunity cost. This often leads to factory closures and immediate hardship for the people in those specific sectors. This chart from the ISM Economic Experts panel illustrates the trade paradox. In the top graph, 100% of surveyed economists agree that trade improves the general well-being of Americans. Yet the lower chart shows that 96% of those same experts agree that these trade deals create real winners and losers, specifically harming workers in competing industries. Trade friction persists because nations must figure out how to distribute these broad economic gains to the specific people who lost their livelihoods. The debate is about managing the gap between total national wealth and individual hardship. To master this concept, remember that comparative advantage focuses on the lowest opportunity cost, rather than who is the fastest producer. Second, remember the 2 sides of the expert consensus. Trade raises total national welfare, but it almost always creates internal winners and losers. You might want to capture this screen for your notes. Approaching trade through this lens helps explain why it is a tool for prosperity, rather than a war between nations. Next time you see a headline about trade deficits, look past production numbers, check the opportunity costs, and you'll see the real forces at work.